You're listening to Investify, preaching financial independence and assisting investors to achieve a more flexible and free lifestyle through smart financial planning and real estate investing. If leaving the corporate world and jumping into this thriving industry is what you desire, tune in and listen to stories of like-minded individuals who made the leap to financial independence. Equip yourself with the right tips and tricks to start your real estate journey, making active or passive ventures that are highly profitable and rewarding.
What's going on, everybody? You are listening to Investify. My name is Craig Curlop, aka the Fi Guy, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Chad, the Dad. Rocky. What up, Dad?
What's going on? Nothing today. I'm super happy to be here. We got a great guest, so that was a good one.
Yeah, we got Chad Carson coming on today. Coach Carson, for those that you may or may not know him. And Chad's been a good friend of mine, man, for years. Like, he was one of the first people I met in the whole financial independence journey, like probably even before my first house hack. Like, it was crazy. It's been really fun to kind of just, kind of keep in touch with him over the years. And yeah, he's got a great story, man. And I got something kind of cool happening in my world too that I want to share. I had a seller come to me. I sold this house to this woman back in May, and she wanted to use it as an Airbnb up in Coeur d'Alene. And Coeur d'Alene is one of those markets, and I told her this, where like you make all your money in 3 months, and then for the rest of the year you're just like barely scraping by, maybe even losing money. But the 3 months usually is worth it.
Yeah.
And she just couldn't handle the up and downs and all arounds and all that stuff. And so she decided that she wanted to sell it, but like there has been almost no appreciation in the past 6 months with rates and all that, and so there's not much equity in the property. And so we kind of did a whole net sheet and all that, and I was like, look, like in order to sell this thing, you've got to sell it at 530 to make any money back, and I think that's a stretch. Like, I think you're probably looking at closer to 515, 520. And she was like obviously kind of upset about that, so she's kind of like figuring out other things to do, and I was kind of just like, wait a second, like what if I just bought it?
I've done this before.
Yeah. And I was just thinking like, I was like, hey, well, I could buy this from you. You would save about 30 grand in realtor commissions. I'll still pay you that 5 grand you want as if you wanted to sell it at 530. And I'll just take over your loan subject to. So now I'm in a house, and she's actually refinancing it for me because I don't show that I make good income, so I can't get a loan, but she's going to refinance it for me at a lower rate. I'm going to pay her closing costs plus 5 grand, and I'm going to be into a property for about 10 grand. And the big debate for me was that it actually doesn't cash flow. We're going to do it as a rent by the room, and it's probably going to lose probably like $300 to $400 a month. And I was like, man, dude, like I always am like cash flow first, cash flow first, cash flow first. But in evaluating the situation, I'm buying a property in a really, really good area that's definitely developing. We got a Trader Joe's coming in like 2 blocks away. It's 5 minutes. Yeah, it's 5 minutes from downtown. And I'm like, am I okay buying a property, absorbing a property into my portfolio that's negative cash flow when I do have a cash flowing portfolio? And so I was like, yeah, well, I'll take a little bit of a hit on the cash flow side, but the appreciation is going to be so much greater that my net worth, if I had $300 a month in cash flow, people would take it. And I'd have an extra $3,600 a year, but it may not appreciate nearly as much. But now I've got a property that's probably going to appreciate 25 to 50 grand a year. That's way better. And then in like 5 or 6 years, I figure I can just sell it, refinance it, whatever, pull some of that money out, and then go apply it to a cash flowing market and get the cash flow I need. And so that was my thought process and brain there. And I think it just goes to show, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I think when I talk to more experienced investors, as you kind of grow your portfolio, I think cash flow is good to make sure that you don't totally fail. But investing for appreciation also will get you to your goal quicker, but you just kind of delay the cash flow along the way, and then you can convert it to cash flow.
That's amazing. That was kind of the question I was going to ask you. I feel like you've kind of changed strategies maybe a little bit, and like, or
Mhm.
mindset. Like, just talking with you lately, it's all about like the longer term and that appreciation play. So that's gonna be my question to you. Of like, do you see that transition more of with investors? Like, okay, starting out cash flow, but then you diversify and you go the appreciation route. Is that what you're kind of thinking?
Yeah, I think like so I've kind of got this like 5-year plan where like my goal is really I want to try to like build up the net worth pretty much as much as possible. And I think the way to do that for sure is going to be through buying investment properties and buying real estate. And my net worth has grown the most by my appreciating properties, not my cash flowing properties. And so I've got a handful of cash flow plays that hardly appreciate, and I've got my handful of appreciation plays, some now cash flow, and eventually the appreciation plays do cash flow once the numbers start working out and rents increase and all that. And so I thought my thought process is just that is that like I'm very bullish on the area, and I think we're going to see great appreciation in this time frame when interest rates are high. Prices have been pretty stagnant over the last year, maybe even down a little bit. I think really once prices do drop and people start realizing this is the new normal, you're going to start seeing that steady increase in pricing again. And you have to kind of remember, you always hear people back in the 70s and 80s buying houses at they're like, oh, I bought houses at 18%. What do you mean 7% is cheap? And then your response to that usually is, well, yeah, your house was 80 grand. But what happened when those rates dropped back to 6%? They skyrocketed, right? And so now you have to imagine that like history, I think there's that saying like history doesn't always repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? History rhymes. And so we're not seeing as high of interest rates as we did, but I feel like if they do drop a little bit, you are going to see that price increase. And so that's one of why we're trying to get in on some stuff now instead of waiting until we can do the same thing we did before.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing we tell all of the buyers we work with. Like, now is the opportunity. If you can't have both low rates and low prices, that's not going to happen. So you can either get in now with a little bit higher rate and then refinance when rates drop, or you wait till rates drop along with everybody and their mothers trying to buy and prices go up. So, it's up, and you and I have kind of seen this, and so hopefully the listeners, can learn from mistakes or just opportunities, I guess I would call it, of now really is an opportunity.
Totally. I mean, it's always a good time to buy. Like, people make fun of realtors and because it's like, oh, they always say like it's always a good time to buy. And it's just because it is. Like the market does this like up and down thing, but it really doesn't. Like if you just zoom out, it really is just kind of like a slow trickle up.
Yeah,
And like the only big down we saw was like '08. And because of how recent it was, everyone thinks it's going to happen again. And I really, you have to remember that the last time that happened was like 1929.
yeah,
And the reason why '08 happened was because everyone thought that real estate just doesn't go down. And so now we know that real estate can go down. So we can make, and lending is supports that. But we just need to know that, like, still remember that, like, that fundamental, like, law kind of exists where, like, if you just hold on long enough, you should be okay. So,
exactly. Yeah, time
so
is
yeah,
on your side when you're younger. You have the time if it goes down, but the trajectory is up, and so just
yep,
get in now in the waiting game.
exactly. Awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share that with you. I'll kind of keep you guys posted on the process and how it goes. But yeah, I'm actually pretty excited for it, and I'm excited that I could help a friend and a client out in a little bit of a tougher situation that she got into. So um, yeah, but speaking of tough situations, uh, Coach Carson tells you never to get into one because he is quite conservative, and I just like love I like literally love Chad Carson. Like I don't something about him is like calming. Like he's just like, yeah. When you're with Chad, you're like, yeah, everything's gonna be okay.
Maybe it's a Chad thing.
Maybe it's a Chad thing. Yeah, yeah. When you're with a Chad, everything's gonna be okay. And so yeah, he's got a great story. We go really deep into some of the creative ways to get started that still apply today. So make sure you kind of listen through the whole thing to hear the before, the middle, and the ending of Chad's story. And also how you can reach out to him because Chad is a wealth of knowledge and he does not hold back with what he wants to share. So with that being said, let's bring Chad Carson, aka Coach Carson, onto the show. This episode of Investify was brought to you by the FI team, a team of investor-friendly agents that service all 50 states. If you are looking to house hack, to invest, grow your portfolio, and want a true investor-friendly agent on your side, go to thefiteam.com and click Get Started, and we can't wait to have a good conversation with you. Chad Carson, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today, dude?
Man, I am good. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I feel like it's been a long time coming. Like you're like I'm so upset because I like genuinely really like you as a person, but I feel like our paths so rarely over like cross that like we end up going like years without talking to each other, which is upsetting for me. But
I think we saw each other in passing at BPCon and just gave like high fives. What's up, Craig? Oh, wait, see you later.
see you later. Yeah, exactly. And like at those conferences, we're always so crazy. But I'm really glad that we get some time with you today. And so, Chad, why don't you kind of take us, from your origin story as to like when you first heard about financial independence and what made you make that switch to this kind of life?
Yeah, my the seed of financial independence for me was I graduated from college, Clemson University. I was a football player there, and so I was just, intense had an intense college experience where it was good. It was amazing. But I was playing football, I was a middle linebacker. I thought I was going to the NFL. That didn't really work out. And I was on the pre-med route. I was a biology major, but I just didn't want to do that. It was just like, another bunch of years of school. And I had this little seed of like, I just want to be flexible. I just want to have freedom. I just want to do what I want to do. And that has now grown, that seed's grown into this like financial freedom idea. And so I got into real estate investing right out of college. Like I decided not to go to medical school and I didn't go to the NFL and I just jumped right in as a like an entrepreneur who I didn't have a lot of to offer, honestly. But I became a deal finder. I was wholesaling properties. I was looking for deals for other people, just kind of scraping by. I lived in a friend of mine's spare bedroom for a while because I wasn't making much money. But eventually that worked. I was flipping houses a lot with I have a 50-50 business partner. And we also started buying rental properties as well. So it was the seed for me though was like I love entrepreneurship. I love investing. I love that I can make my own schedule. I can create my own life and design things. And so that was from the very beginning, that was a really enticing idea for me.
That's amazing. Could you just take a step back? Like what year was this that you kind of got started?
So it's 21 years ago, 2003, 2002, I'm sorry, when I graduated from college. So
Okay.
dating myself a little bit. Hey, I'm 44 years old now, but yeah,
Dang, dude.
got, I got right into
Yeah.
it.
Wow. So you got into it like before real estate was cool, right? Like before bigger pockets, before like all this stuff. And so like who made that who if it wasn't bigger pockets, like who made that switch for you? Like
Well, I was lucky because my dad had rental properties growing up, but it was something that I didn't like. Like when I was in middle school, he would buy a foreclosure property in Atlanta, Georgia, Noonan, Georgia, where I'm from, and it would be in the middle of the summer, and he would get a pretty good deal on a foreclosure house, but you never know what you're going to get sometimes when you buy at the auction, which is what he did. And so he would get a property, it would have like the refrigerator full of food. It'd be piles of trash everywhere, and he's like, he just dropped me off and say, "Hey, clean this fridge for me, Chad, or clean up this house." And I'm like, real estate's horrible. Like who would ever want to do this? And that was me, a little, unappreciative middle schooler. But eventually I said, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. And so he had books on the shelf that I would read. He had a lot of courses, tapes, like old school like tapes and stuff that I would put in a little Walkman, in my car and I learned how to do it.
That's awesome. Um, I feel like I see this all the time, but like parents, I come across it time and time again of learning from your parents. And at that time, you don't really appreciate it, but looking back, like to have that experience and that's amazing. And just what area of the country, or where is this at? Where did you grow up?
So outside of Atlanta, so Metro Atlanta is where I grew up, and that's where I got my start the first year in real estate after college. But I moved back to Clemson, South Carolina. So it's one state away, kind of near the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, really pretty waterfalls. I'm into outdoors. I love the walking in the woods and just having a smaller place to live. So I live in Clemson. I invest in Clemson today. So 21 years later, and that's where I really, after leaving Atlanta and finding a business partner, the two of us got started flipping houses in South Carolina. So that's pretty much where we've done everything up here.
Nice. That's awesome. I think I have the opposite of when I first was thinking about getting a rental property, my brother had kind of like a rent by the room situation. And my brother was like, don't do it. Stay far, far away. To this day, I still remember that conversation. I'm like, good thing I didn't listen to him.
Yeah, family can go either way. Like I happen to have a entrepreneur family, and I feel very fortunate for that. So I guess I had kind of an easier route. But like whether you have family who hates real estate or whether you have family who's like encouraging you, you can either just like do the opposite of what they tell you to do, or you can like, follow their lead. But for me, having a mentor early on was like a huge like a leg up, which is part of why I like to get on podcasts and share with other people because it's fun to like go full circle and bring other people with us. That's the most fun thing to do.
For sure. So where was your dad at, like in his journey when you got started? Like financially free? Was he working? What was he doing?
They were in a lot of debt at that point. So let me give you the full picture. My dad had a business partnership with my mom. My mom was a dentist, and so she was a high earner, made good money as a dentist. But is probably a lot of people know, you make a lot of money, but that doesn't mean you have like true wealth. And so what my dad brought to the equation, he was the investor. My mom was the active income earner, and so he went out there and bought rental properties and then used leverage. So when he started, he was in the early '90s and interest rates. It's kind of funny now. Interest rates are 7-8%. Back my dad's like, yeah, when I started, it was 7% was good. Like that was a good interest rate, and so he got started buying properties like single family houses, just putting 20% down, pretty traditional approach because they were high income earners. And I think that's what you have to know about yourself. If you make a lot of money but have very little time, like a doctor, engineer, something, you can be pretty vanilla. You can be pretty traditional and buy real estate with a very traditional approach, getting a long-term loan, and that could work just fine, which is what they did. But it took a while. When I started working with him, he was flipping some houses. He was also owning these rental properties. But as often happens, they didn't really pay off yet. Like he had 15-year loans and 20-year loans, and so they were kind of wealth building machines. But fast forward now, my mom is retired. They live 100% off income. They have no debt on any of their rental properties. It's just that, what started off as those like high debt, leveraged, little rental properties now are free and clear and have completely replaced their income, and they live off that.
That's amazing. And so that's their retirement, right? I mean, that's kind of how I
Yeah,
view my retirement is like you buy a house at 30, in 30 years, you have it paid off. Now you've got your retirement, right?
exactly.
I
Exactly. And,
mean,
and they, yeah. And that's, I think the typical approach. I think that's nothing wrong with that. Like take a 15, most people don't have enough money to retire. My parents, other people, like if you just buy 5 rental properties, you own them, you pay them off, you know, $5,000 a month, $7,000 a month, like that's way more than people having pensions and social security. So they kind of took a more traditional route and it worked just fine for them. My route was a little bit more entrepreneurial because I didn't have a W-2 job like to start. I was just having to like flip houses and figure out how to get. So I got a lot more creative with my financing because I couldn't go to the bank and just put 20% down. I did a lot more things like seller financing, lease options. I used a lot of private money. That was my main source of financing. I figured out how to find like other more experienced investors who had retirement accounts, and I would show them how they could put that in a self-directed retirement account and loan it to me and make interest. So yeah, that's kind of the world I was in was a little bit different than my mom and dad were in, but both are viable paths.
yeah. So I love to hear the scrappiness, right? Because I think a lot of people listening to, they want to get out of their W-2 jobs maybe quicker than the average person. And so what does it look like? I think seller financing at that point has been belabored quite a bit, I think, in the last couple of years. Um, I'm really curious to hear about your lease options and kind of what that looks like from the perspective of, it sounds like you were the renter. Is that
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear your perspective of that and how you might be able to use that to your advantage.
Yeah, so lease option is very similar to seller financing. It's often I would make when I got seller financing, I would often make a lease option offer first. And let me do a little role play real quick just to explain what I mean by that. If I'm talking to a seller, very rarely, and I don't recommend this, just go in and ask somebody, "Hey, will you seller finance this property to me?" Like, nobody knows what that means. Nobody knows why that's a benefit. But what I often do ask somebody is I would say, "Hey, you're trying to sell this property. Like, why don't you just rent it? Like, have you thought about just like keeping it as a rental and doing all that?" And when you ask that question, you often hear an objection like, "Well, I would rent it, but I don't want to deal with tenants. I don't want to deal with this and that." And like a logical follow-up question would be like, "So if you didn't have to deal with all the tenants and the headaches and the maintenance, it would still be you'd like to get the income, you just don't want to deal with all that stuff." And so I like that's I did some deals like that where I would talk to the seller. They were typically like a landlord, a former landlord, or like an amateur landlord. They kind of got in the landlording business, but they like the idea, but they don't like the execution and the management of it. And a
Mhm.
lease option is a really good, it's a good tool in situations where you have a high price property that's like a pretty property that doesn't need a ton of work, because you don't want to lease a property that you don't own and put some effort and money into it if it's like a major fixer upper. A lease option is a perfect tool for me. The deals I did, where it's like I would get a single family house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, good shape. It was built 7 years ago, and they just don't want to, but they don't want to have the monthly payment. Maybe they're like moving out of town, and I would say something like, well, I'll start paying you $1,000 per month, like next month, right away, and you don't have to deal with it anymore. And then a few years from now, when I can come up with the money, I'll give you the price you're asking. So like this would be a good tool in an appreciating market where you want to kind of speculate a little bit, but you don't want to go pay full price for a property, because what if it goes down in value? And you could use a lease with an option to buy to control the price of the property, essentially get a contract on it. And if that $150,000 property goes up to $200,000 a couple of years from now, then you can buy it and benefit from the appreciation of it by controlling it with a contract.
That's awesome. That's a really good strategy. Where would you find these properties? For the listeners wanting to do this strategy, MLS, or you driving for dollars, or door knocking, cold calling. What was your strategy?
Yeah, I'm not going to say the MLS would be impossible. Like I have my license on dormant status, so I've done done the kind of traditional MLS route too. But I think most of the deals that are more creative that I've done have been off market, where I go directly to the seller. And so the way I have a lot of different ways I try to find them. Driving for dollars is my favorite. If you pick a farm neighborhood that you really like, and then you just drive around or walk around and you look for properties that are vacant, you look for properties that are for sale by owner, you look for properties that are for rent by owner. That'd be another good lease option candidate or seller financing candidate. And then I just have a system for reaching out to them, and it could be really simple. I just have call them if I can, send them a letter, knock on the neighbor's door, and you just essentially just create like a funnel, or a sales funnel of different people you talk to, and you just try to get as many properties as you can that fit those categories: vacant, for sale by owner, for rent by owner. And then you just talk and follow up and follow up, and not every person is going to be a good candidate, and some people will just want to sell their house for cash. They don't want to do all this creative stuff. Some people might be a good candidate for lease options. I look at it as like I have this toolbox of financing tools: cash, seller financing, DSCR loans, house hacking, whatever the case might be. And then I just talk to people, and depending on what their situation is, I pull the right tool out for that situation. And that's what lease options are. Lease options is not like the most common tool I've ever used, but there's been some situations where it made a ton of sense. And so I pull that tool out, I make an offer, and some people say yes to it.
Awesome. So I just want to kind of make sure I've got this lease option totally grasped. And so you're going to go to a seller. You're essentially going to rent it from the seller.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get their passive income. Let's say it's like a 3-year lease option. And so are you able to exercise that before the 3 years and say, hey, I'd like to buy it at this
Yeah.
price in a year and a half?
Yeah, the only difference between an option and like a regular purchase contract is, one is typically a little bit longer. So like 3 years, try to get it as long as you can. Like 5 years would be great, 10 years would be awesome. But 3 to 5 years would probably be typical. And then you have a window of time when you can execute the option. I mean, typically you'd have like starting day one all the way through 3 years. Anytime I want to, I could buy it for whatever your price is. Let's say 300 grand. Let's say that you have a $300,000 option price. So that's kind of like the purchase and sale agreement. That's the price you can buy it for. But here's the big difference between an option and a purchase and sale agreement. I don't have to buy the property. I
Mm,
can buy the property. I have the right to buy the property, and I give the seller something of value, that they get up front for giving me the option. And so the
mm,
only question is, what is that thing of value? Like an easy example would be, I'll give you $5,000 up front, non-refundable. You keep this money, and if I don't buy the property, you get to keep the $5,000.
I
That would be
see.
an that would be like a typical example, but you don't have to give money all the time. Like I've had some where I put $1,000 as a security deposit, and the option, the consideration for the option was me leasing the property and doing a little bit of sweat equity on the property. So in exchange for me painting the property, fixing it up, and renting it from you for 3 years, you'll give me the option to buy it for $300,000. And the benefit for me is I rented it for $1,000. I'm going to try to rent it. I get to sublease it. I get to lease it out to my tenant for $1,300, or if you're a short-term rental person, or if you're a house hacker, that'd be another kind of cool. You could basically do an arbitrage between the rent you pay that person and whatever you could collect by renting the property out to your tenants.
That's awesome. How do you would value the property, let's say today it's 250, and then you say, okay, I want to buy it at 300 in 3 years from now. Do you have a model that you kind of, or a rule of thumb that you go by to come up with that number?
The rule I always learned is you got to buy low, sell high, right? And so I don't want to get an option for 300,000. I want to at a minimum I want to get it for today's price. Like so, if it's worth 250 today, I'm going to try to get an option for 250. But I would like to get it lower. Like this depends on the seller's market, buyer's market, where we are. We're in a market with a pretty low supply, where it's a little bit more difficult to negotiate. So lease option is actually a good tool in a rising market when you want to speculate. You want to, so let's just say the $250,000 house is worth 250 today, and it's more reasonable that somebody might give you an option to buy it for 250. So I might give them $5,000 for the option to be able to buy their property for the next 3 years. And what's my game plan? How am I going to make money on that? Well, number one, I'm going to make money on the difference between what I'm renting it to them for and what I'm paying them in rent and what I rent to my tenants for. So hopefully, I'm making, let's say, $200 or $300 a month on that. That would be the kind of a minimum for me. So $3,600 per year. And then if that property that's worth 250 today, let's say it goes up to 300,000 3 years from now, I don't know, maybe it won't, maybe it'll go down. But if it does go up, then I could execute my option at that point. I could go get a loan, buy the property, and now I have equity in the property. Or what I did like several times early in my career was I had that option. And then my tenant who was living there wanted to, they said, I'd like to buy the property. And so I just made a deal with my tenant and said, hey, how about you buy it for 300,000? And so I would do like essentially a double closing in the end, or I would just assign my option to them and say, hey, tenant, you get to buy it, you get to have my option, and you have to pay me $50,000 for my option to buy the property. So they get a $300,000 property, I make $50,000, and in the meantime, I made rent. And I started with $1,000, $5,000, and so that's the pretty cool part about lease options is you get in very light on the front end.
So what's the incentive for the landlord or like the owner of the property to do that?
Going back to it's got to be a motivation that's outside of I'm just trying to make the most money for my property. That's why it's not everybody, right? This is often a landlord. This is somebody who's got to move really quickly. It might be somebody who, they don't want to make their mortgage payment. They're like, I consider renting the property, but I don't want to deal with that. And so you guaranteeing them a rent and saying, I will pay you $1,000 per month, no matter what, whether this property is vacant, whether whatever happens. So it's somebody who values certainty. Is somebody who just wants to get a solution pretty quickly. And, not everybody's in that situation, but that's why it's a particular tool for a particular person. And I would say I would prefer to buy the property instead of a lease option. Like I like getting the deed to the property. But what often happens is I might say, look, I'll pay you for that $250,000 property. I'll pay you $200,000. That's the price that works for me as an investor. But they might say, well, I'm not going to sell it for 200. And so I might come back and say, well, what if we did this? What if I paid you 250, but this is the way I could do it. I'll make the payment to you of $1,000 a month. I get an option. So it could either be like a fallback plan, or it could be, you could give them two offers. You could give them $200,000 plus the lease option offer and have it A or B. Like, which one do you want to do? I'll do either one of those that you choose.
Yeah, that's awesome. To your point, like it's not for everybody. When I was first looking into like seller finance and subject to, I couldn't wrap my head around like who in the world would do this. Like this makes absolutely zero sense to the average realtor, the average person in general. And I've come to find out and just learn of like, there's instances out there that you can't even think of, that you don't even know are out there of sellers in a position. And so now, like, I agree with you. It has to be a perfect solution for that seller. And it's just about getting out and talking to people, because there is these random situations that you could never even think of that are out there. It's just the more people you talk to, you just got to find them. So they're out there.
The other thing I'll say, I've been in sales for 21 years now, because being an entrepreneur in sales is we often we try to do somebody else's thinking for them. We think because this is not the right thing for me, then it's not necessarily the right thing for this person. And I've been convinced wrong so many times, where I had this little voice in my head, like, oh, they'll never take that. That's not good for them. And yet I have it like, who am I to know what's going on inside their head? What I really need to do is just make an offer to see what they'll do. And I've had people surprise me over and over again. I've also had real estate agents who are listing a property tell me they'll never do that. My client will never do that. I make the offer, the client does that. So it's like even the real estate agent doesn't know what the client's thinking, and so if they don't even know, I think the moral of the story is don't overthink this. Like go out there, do the best you can, try to solve people's problems, be a good person. Like you don't have to be a schemer, you don't have to convince people of things they don't want to do. You just got to offer solutions to problems, and that's how we make money. We're problem solvers. Doctors they do brain surgeries and make money because they fix somebody's brain problem. We solve house problems where somebody doesn't want a house or they have an issue with a house. We as an investor solve that problem for a profit.
Yeah, I've got a friend here up in Coeur d'Alene that we sold her a house back in May, and it's not performing the way she wanted it to on Airbnb, and she really doesn't have much equity in it. She bought it at 3.5% down, and so I kind of told her, I was like, well, hey, I might buy it from you, and so I'm essentially doing like a subject. She's actually refinancing it for me at a lower rate. I'm going to pay the closing costs. She's going to do a subject too, and like if we went to the market, she would pretty much lose money for sure. And I'll just say, hey, I'll give you $5,000 for this house. And so I'm pretty much into this house at a lower interest rate for a total of 10 grand. And it's probably not going to cash flow if I'm being honest, but it's in a great appreciation area.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, it feels like a win-win. And like, she's getting way more than she would if she went to market. I'm getting a house for 10 grand. And
Yeah.
that's the problem, right? That's how you get the win-win.
And she trusts you like that. To me,
Yeah.
like the brilliant thing about there's all these situations like nobody will ever do that. But would you do it if you trusted that person? Like Craig's a trustworthy person. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things I would do with someone I trust, who I feel good about, who has a solution. But that's the secret. Like every loan I've borrowed from a private lender, every seller financing deal I've done, every lease option deal I've done, heck, anything I've done in business has been because this person trusted me and we worked together. So if you start with trust and you start with building relationships with people, and then you also learn all these creative tools, then you can solve people's problems. But a lot of people try to start with the creative tool and just think it's like a magical wand or something. Like, no, it's like,
Mhm.
you start with the people and then you bring these, and being a real estate agent is a tool too. Like it's a great tool. Like it's often the best thing for people to do. And so when I'm talking to people, I put all the tools on the table and say, hey, why don't you just sell with a real estate agent? Why don't you do that? Why don't you do this? And I let them tell me why they should do one tool or the other.
Totally. We hope this episode is inspiring you to take action. If you're thinking about becoming a real estate agent or an agent who wants to join an investor-friendly team, just hit me up on Instagram at the Fi Guy, because we are growing our team in Denver, Seattle, San Diego, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, but also adding to our network in all 50 states. And if you didn't already know this, the Fi team provides a super supportive environment with one-on-one coaching, accountability, and ongoing training to help develop kick-ass, rock star, investor-friendly real estate agents. So hit me up on Instagram at the Fi Guy, shoot me a DM, and we'll set up a time to chat. Can't wait to chat with you.
Maybe turn it a little bit to another topic. Just curious on your private money lender. People always ask me, like, I don't have the money. What do I do? And one option is private money lender, but they don't have any properties. And and some of these people, like, they'll have a property or two, and I just tell them, like, you have proof of concept. Like, you just got to get out there and start talking to people and like tell everybody it's like trying to find a girlfriend. Like, hey, I want a girlfriend. And the more people you tell that to, eventually a girlfriend's going to come up. But if you don't tell anybody, you don't tell girls,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to find one. Similar to like a private money lender. Craig, you like that analogy, or you're smiling?
Yeah.
Is it pretty poor?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a C- on that one, Chad.
All right, I suppose.
But no, it's all good.
Like, how did you find your first private money lender, or any tips like for listeners that are just starting out, they don't have, maybe not positioned to put a lot of capital down? Yeah, if you could just speak on that.
Yeah, I'll give you quick stories on my first two private lenders. The first one was actually, I was still in college. So I was going back and taking classes, and I was taking a business class. And we should all have our radar up when we hear that somebody else is a real estate investor. And in this case, I was sort of interested in real estate, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And this professor was like, yeah, I've got rental properties. This is what I do on the side. And so after class, I just went up and started talking to him. And it was another 2 years before I actually borrowed private money from him, or a year and a half. But the seed was planted by having conversations with people and meeting with people and just networking with people who do real estate. But here's where it led from like just a friendship and a mentorship to a private lender conversation. Was I think we should tell everybody what we do, instead of talking about the weather, definitely instead of talking about politics or something, like talk about what you do. Like, and so for me, it would be, what are you up to, Chad? I haven't seen you in a while. I was like, well, I'm out looking for properties. I'm finding these old fixer upper properties that we can put money into and then turn around and sell it, make a profit on it. And if you start planting that seed, I even have an email signature. This is something I put on Twitter this week. I used to have an email signature, just automatically puts it in Gmail. Hey, I buy properties in Clemson. If you see something that's a fixer upper, a single family, a duplex, a mobile home park, I love to buy that property. Let me know. The point is, like, I'm telling everybody what I do. And if their eyes light up, if they're interested a little bit, then I ask, oh, are you interested in real estate? What's going on? And so for this professor, eventually I kept telling him what I was doing. And I said, hey, I'm finding properties right now. I think I'm going to find a good deal that looks like this. I think it's worth 120 because it's back in 2003. I could probably buy it for 80 or 90,000 bucks, but I need the money to do that. Is that something you'd be interested in? And putting up the money. And he said, yeah, let's talk. And so I got a little piece of paper like this, I would draw on a piece of paper, say, here's what it would look like. I'll buy it for this. You would loan the $90,000 to buy it and fix it up. And then I'll pay you 10% interest. That was what I paid back then. And we just kind of did the back of the envelope kind of conversation to start off. And he said, yeah, that sounds good. And so I got that. Yes, I got that. Like, that sounds good. And I had to go get some more formal paperwork from an attorney. Like, all right, I need a promissory note. I need a mortgage. So there are other steps there, but it's just conversations. And it's just explaining what I did with that professor was explaining something that he was already interested in. And I explained how it would benefit him. He was looking for a property that would make him some money without him having to do all the work. I was looking for somebody to put up the money. And so there's so many people with money out there. There's more people with money out there than there are people who have deals. So if you can find a deal, you have to go just do the work of finding those people who are interested in loaning money.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's what I always. That's what I always say. Like, you just gotta get out there and talk to people. That's really what it comes down to, and find the deals. One question I too kind of struggle with, and I hear people ask me too, and it can be partnerships or it can be like private money lending, but like, how do you structure it? My take on it is like, whatever feels fair for all parties involved is usually like the high level of it. But I'm curious to your thoughts of like, how do you structure either partnerships or private money lending, or any thoughts on that?
I mean, I prefer the entrepreneur and the lender relationship. So if you wanted to come loan me money, Chad, if that was your situation, I would say plan A for me would be you loaning me the money and me letting you be the bank. You have a mortgage or a deed of trust on the property and me just pay you interest every month. So like, that's always my preference because that's so simple. I own the property, you are the lender. If something happens to me, you foreclose on me and take the property back. And you start getting like, I like partnerships too. And I'll get into like my plan B if we want to do a partnership, but it's just a little bit more complicated. There's more moving parts. Paying interest is so easy. And so I try to sell that and say, hey, if I paid you 6% interest and you didn't have to do any of the work, and this property is worth $300,000 and your loan is $200,000. So if I got run over by a bus, which I hope it doesn't happen, but if I do, like, you'll go to my funeral. I hope you shed a tear or two. But when you're done, when you walk out of there, you're going to get a property that you can take back that is worth a lot more than what you loaned me for. So I got security and safety. We've got interest. I've had private lenders who I paid for years, and like, this is my grocery money. This is how I pay my retirement. With your interest. So that's a super simple structure. Anybody can do that. Any attorney, real estate attorney, can help you set that up. But there are some people who want to do a partnership instead of doing like a private lender. So like, what if that person doesn't have 200 grand, for example? Like your buddy, I go to Craig and Craig wants to do it because I only got 50 grand. Well, we could do a partnership where we buy the property for 200,000. Craig puts up the $50,000 and he gets a loan. Maybe he's like a W-2 worker who doesn't have any time for real estate. And I could go to Craig and Craig could essentially buy the property using his money and his credit. And then we could figure out a way to split that property on the back end. So I could manage it, I could take care of it, and then we could have a game plan. Like, if it's a buy and hold rental property, we might have a plan to hold it for the next 10 years. Hopefully it'll go up a lot in value, and then I'll manage it. We'll split the profits 50-50. And he brings the money, I bring the deal and the management. And we could split that a couple different ways, but you could set up an LLC and own the property together. Or we could go back to my friend, the lease option. We could do a lease option and do the same little strategy I talked about earlier with a seller. I've done the same thing with partners as well, where my partner owns it and I lease it from my partner with an option to buy it for like a higher price, for like maybe I build in like a certain amount of profit for my partner, and then we could split the deal essentially using a contract like a lease option as well. That's another creative way to do it.
Wow. So this is kind of like, I mean, I know we're kind of, I think this actually, we went so deep on how you got started with all this creative stuff. And this was back in 2002, 2003. I mean,
Yeah.
like forever ago. Do these concepts still work today?
Absolutely. Yeah. Lease option is one of the most powerful but underused and least understood techniques. Like people are talking a lot about subject to right now, and I've done a few subject to deals, and I have no problem with that too. But the whole, if you can learn all of these techniques, and you don't want to learn them all at once. I learned them by necessity. I would say the one I used the most is private money. Like that was the most common tool, was private money. Seller financing was probably second. Lease options and subject to are kind of third and fourth for me.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
all of them are amazing. And the thing is that if you want to do deals in a market like we're in right now, low supply, rising interest rates have gone up, prices have gone up. It feels like a weird market because we're comparing it to 2008, 9, and 10, or we're comparing to some of these other markets we were in. But this is a pretty typical market if you look over the last 40, 50, 60 years. This typical interest rates, typical price structures. The prices have outrun the rents a little bit more than in the past. But the way I look at it is these are the tools you need to use in a normal investing market. So if when I started in 2003 and when my dad started in 1990, buying real estate, you had to get a pretty good deal. Like you had to get it well below value, like 20%, 30% below value, or you had to get terms. You had to get really good financing that was better than just going to the bank and paying a regular old interest rate. And so that's
Hmm.
it. Like that's the name of the game today, I think, is buy it low or get low terms. And so we need to learn how to do both of those to make sense today.
Yeah, when I'm talking to like a seller or anybody, especially if they're kind of trying to get a deal done, I always say like, "Hey, you can either get the price you want, or you get the terms you want." And so we actually we bought the land below us, our house, on seller financing, and we were going back and forth with these sellers for over a year, and they just wanted the highest price and their terms. I'm like, "Look, like I can't give you over market price and terms, so like
Yeah.
pick one or the other." And I think that's just, if you can just describe that eloquently to someone that may not be as sophisticated, they should understand.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
awesome. All right, Chad. So, I mean, you got started in a lot of different ways, and I think like knowing all these tools is really good, and it's actually really almost like a breath of fresh air to know that you can still do a lot of these concepts, and the strategies still apply today. And so, um, we kind of passed over the for real deal and all that. And I think that's okay, given that you just like described how you started with all those cool, unique strategies of private money, lease options, all that stuff. And so like, did you just continue to do that to scale? And like, what, tell me about how you went from like properties one, two, three, probably a timid little
Yeah.
investor, to now having an empire.
Yeah, I was very timid starting off for sure. And I used some of these tools to buy some rentals, but we fast forward, like I started in 2002, into 2002, 2003. Fast forward to 2007, people remember their history of the Great Recession happened. And I was buying, my business partner and I really scaled up a lot in 2007. We had 33 acquisitions closings in 1 year. And so we were
Mhm.
flipping houses, we were buying rental properties. We were just going. It was good and bad. Like I did some really good deals. We bought lots of properties that were with good seller financing. We flipped some houses and made big money. The problem was we were scaling so fast that we got sloppy, and we bought
Mhm.
some properties were in bad locations. We bought some where we underestimated repairs. So the story of my career at that point was we had a huge recession and we had overbought. We'd kind of overextended ourselves a little bit, and so we had to eat into our reserves for a year or two right after
Wow.
that, because vacancies were happening, because we were having to cover 30,000 in repairs that we didn't really estimate. So we had been frugal. Speaking of FI, like we've been super
Yeah.
frugal that entire time, and I lived like a college student, even though we were making money, and we had to use that. And so the big takeaway for me there was I sort of got on this idea of the small and mighty investor that I wrote a book about for Bigger Pockets, is that you don't have to be You don't have to follow like the traditional, what everybody tells you to do. You got to have a single family and get to a duplex, and then you go to a fourplex, and then finally you're going to be on a multi-unit. Then finally you'll be a syndicator. Like that's cool for some people, right? But that's not the real situation I've seen for most wealthy real estate investors. But like I followed a guy named John Schaub for a long time. He's a teacher of mine, mentor of mine. His idea is just buy one house at a time. Just build
Mhm.
wealth one house at a time. Like even just at a minimum, just buy a property a year for the rest of your life, and you will get extremely wealthy. But and the
Mhm.
side benefit of that is if you try to be aggressive like we did and buy tons of properties all at one time, you don't even learn from the mistakes you made. Like
Right.
you already own the property. Whereas if you buy one at a time, maybe one a month, one a quarter, one a year, you take a deep breath, you kind of assess what you did. Oh, that went well, that didn't go well. Let me do that a little bit differently next time. And it's a more reasonable pace. And so that's
Mm.
what I'm a bigger advocate now for, being a little bit more tortoise-like in your growth, because I think the tortoise still wins the race, and
Mhm.
at least
Mhm.
you have a good peace of mind. And I'm also for at some point, like so. Fast forward my story just to wrap that up. We got really big really fast. It took us a while to kind of clean up our portfolio, but in the end, for me, it's been not trying to go huge and actually like maybe like eventually pay off some of your properties, have a simpler portfolio. So like we've taken our debt in our portfolio. We now have 99 units, by the way, between me and a business partner, 33 properties, 99 units, but we've paid off a lot of properties. We've gone from like 70% debt down to like 20% debt. We focus more on cash flow, more on being passive. So I've lived in Spain for a year. I've lived 17 months in Ecuador. So for me, like the dream that we always had of freedom is a portfolio that's a small and mighty portfolio where it's simpler, it's lower risk, actually gets you there better than trying to scale to the moon and keep on growing forever. And I think that's what most people want. They want that flexibility, that freedom, that time, and not just being the biggest person on Instagram with the most properties.
That's awesome. You pretty much answered my question, but I always love the question of somebody, especially someone like you that has been doing it for a while. Like, if you could start it all over again, what would you do? But you basically just summed that up. Is there anything else you'd add to that question?
Yeah, it's always tough to go back in history and try to change things. Like I learned a ton from that. And maybe I'm just a blockheaded person and I have to like touch the fire to learn it. So maybe that's what I had to do to learn this lesson. But I would say for those of you who don't want to make the same mistake I did, just pace yourself. Just think that it's just like running a big ultra marathon. Like if you're not in shape to run an ultra marathon, there's no reason for you to sprint and try to run an ultra marathon. Like basically buying like 5 properties in 1 year when you're a brand new investor is like trying to sprint an ultra marathon. Just start reasonably slow. You can speed up, after you buy a property or two for a couple of years. If you're confident, you're doing well, and you got your money, like yeah, start accelerating a little bit. But that's the big lesson is like you don't have to be in a hurry. You don't have to get big. You can do really really well by being like doing reasonable steps. And in fact, sometimes I think you'll do better because you'll be more thoughtful, you'll be more deliberate, and just remember Aesop's fable. The tortoise beat the hare, and in real estate, the tortoise beats the hare because we take less risk. We plod along, but we get there. And the goal is not to have the most properties 5 years from now or 2 years from now. The goal is to like have the most time, the most freedom, the most money for the rest of your life. And so taking a lot of risk early on in order to think that's the right trip is not the best way to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good advice.
Yeah, Chad, this is great, man. And so like so today you kind of did the whole like, started off in a like when you said you're with a partner, like what does your partner provide? What do you provide when it
Mhm.
comes to that at your scale at this time?
Yeah, I mean, early on, we were 50-50 in that I bought the properties, I got the money, he managed the rehab, and then he sold it or managed the rental. So, like, we just
Mm.
literally split the business, and, like, we didn't have any employees, it was just the 2 of us, and we hired contractors. So we early on, that was how it worked. Later on, like, now, I've measured this for the last few years. I work on average about 2 hours per week on my real estate. He probably does
Mm.
about the same. And so what do we do now? We work on bookkeeping together, we have our annual meeting together, we strategize together. But he's actually, it's kind of cool, like partnerships evolve, and my he has another business that's made pretty good money, and so he's loaned money to our business, and so he has a little bit more capital in the business than I do. But then within our real estate business, we're still 50-50. And so he's become a little bit more of a capital partner. I've still been like the kind of entrepreneur partner, negotiating deals here and there. But yeah, partnerships all look a little bit different, but for us, it started off as more of an entrepreneur venture. Now it's like a pure investment venture where we're more passive, but we're making some loans here and there. We're buying some rental properties with people. Like last year, we look for the best assets in our market. So we're in Clemson. So we bought a single family house right next to another rental we had that's right near the elementary school. So I have a very clear buy box of what type of property I'm looking for: long-term rental, some student rentals. We have a lot of apartments that are student rentals right near Clemson's campus. So that's kind of another niche we do. But
Mhm.
we stick to that niche, and we buy a couple new properties a year, and then we sell off a couple properties here and there. But we're maintaining what we have and just trying to kind of slowly continue improving it.
How do you decide? I had a mentor one time tell me that like he regrets every property he's ever sold. And
Mm,
so it doesn't sound like you really need to sell any of your properties because at your portfolio size and the amount of leverage you have, I suspect your wins can cover your losses and eventually they all
yeah.
become wins. But like what makes you decide to sell?
Yeah, I think I call this pruning your portfolio. Like if you were a gardener and you had a fruit tree, you prune some of the branches in order for the other branches to be stronger. And we had this a way of evaluating our portfolio. We would make a list of all of our properties, and we'd have some like criteria, like how much hassle is this property, or how many good does this property attract really good tenants, or does it attract, for some reason some properties just attract continually tenants who don't pay on time, who give you hassles. And so over the last 7-8 years, we've been pruning our portfolio, selling off the ones that were more of a hassle from a tenant standpoint. But also I've learned over time, like not every property is created equally from a maintenance standpoint. Like
Mm,
maintenance will eat you alive. And so let me give you a like real clear example. If you have one property, which is like my favorite property, is a single story brick ranch. So it's just like 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, all in one story. It's got a crawl space, easy to get to the plumbing. It's got a really simple roof line. There's not a bunch of moving, crazy lines. It's just a rectangle, a rectangular box with brick and vinyl. Like that thing is just like bulletproof on the outside. It's got hardwood floors inside, tile, all these like really durable materials. And then take another example. I have another house that's like 2 stories. It looks really pretty, but it's got a wooden siding. It's got a really fancy roof line, but it's got all sorts of like complicated, eaves that can leak, and it's got it's on a hill, and so the water runs right down to the foundation of the property. So like not every rental property is going to, well, some rental property is going to be maintenance nightmares. Some properties are going to be easy to maintenance. And so I think you prune off the properties that are maintenance nightmares, and you have to do your bookkeeping to know which ones those are, which ones are not actually making the most money. And you go ahead and harvest your equity. You can sell that property, do a 1031 exchange maybe, or maybe we've just sold it and paid the taxes in some cases. And just you sell that off, you redeploy your equity somewhere else, and then you make your life easier. So every year your life's a little bit easier, to the point now we have one or two properties we still want to sell that have become a problem lately. But for the most part, we're like, hey, we like our portfolio a lot, and puts you in a good position because you don't have to sell, you don't have to do anything. You're just in a really, I feel like it's like the Warren Buffett equivalent of real estate. Like he's just patient. Like he just sits there and study stuff. Like that's what I always wanted to be. I wanted to be like a patient investor, and you can do that when you cull your portfolio over time.
mm. Maybe that's your next book, The Patient Investor.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think going back to my question, like from the listeners who starting from day one, um, taking that advice of basically keeping it simple is kind of what I heard there. Of like,
Mhm.
I don't think many people will look at roof lines or even like 2-story or 3-story buildings, or even like how old are the gutters. It sounds like what you did or what the homes you like now, learning from the past, is very, very simple. 1 story, you can get to the plumbing. Um, the 3-bed, 2-bath, long-term renter. I think that's such good advice of just looking back and learning on your experience in your past of maybe looking at those things in the future.
Yeah, I've taken some students and some friends to look at my properties one time, and they were kind of disappointed. They're like, "Oh, that's your rentals?" I'm like, "Yeah, these simple little boxes are my best rentals." And they're expecting like big, fancy, beautiful properties. They're like, "No, no, no, like simple boxes. That's it."
Yeah, it's funny, and I think that works in a lot of. It's funny, like I feel like in the Southeast, I've got some properties in North Carolina. I don't know if that's considered the Southeast. I feel like
Yeah, it is.
we're
Yeah,
it is. It's considered okay. We're okay.
yeah.
And those are. I have 6 properties, and they're all the exact same, 3-bed, 2 bed, like exactly what you're describing. But I'll say like in some more expensive markets like Denver, like a 3-bed, 2-bath just like will not cash flow in
Mhm.
some of these more expensive markets. And so you also have to like make sure that like your market adheres to the house type that you're getting, because I think it's very different.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have a different single family house is 1 buy box. I also love studio apartments, so I'm in a college town. So if you're in an urban environment, Denver is a wonderful market too. Yeah, you just got to adjust your buy box. So you got to figure out what's what. But I think the principle here is like simple. Simple is the best. And so, if like my single, I love studio apartments because they're like 300 or 400 square feet, and they have the most rent per square foot of anything I own. Like
Mm,
they rent for $600 and they are 300 square feet. That's
wow.
$2 per square foot. I have a single family house that's 1,500 square feet and it rents for $1,500. That's $1
Yeah.
per square foot. And so if you think about it from a maintenance standpoint, like I have to paint it with the same kind of paint. I got to do, same amount of flooring. I've got half the maintenance I do on a studio apartment. And so the more efficient, that's the principle here, is like the bigger the house is not the better the rental necessarily. It's got more hassle, it's got more maintenance, it's got more cost, and so you got to kind of buy a balance point there.
Yeah, I think it's really funny is when, and this is kind of like my big gripe with some of like the bigger pockets calculators and how people calculate maintenance and in vacancy, is that people do it as a percentage of rent, right? But people are going to pay more for a house in a better location that's bigger, that's nicer. It's a total opposite correlation as to what
Yeah.
you actually need for vacancy reserves and expense reserve and all that kind of stuff. And so I think you kind of hit that nicely there. Um, One question on your student rentals. Are you guys renting like, are they just small little studios for the students, or do you rent, a house, a 5-bedroom house rented out by the room kind of thing?
It's the first one. So we have a regulation in Clemson, and this is probably common in other towns too, where you can't take a house and rent it 5 bedrooms out. So the rent by the room is a problem in Clemson if I want to do that, because they have a license. You have a rental license that you have to be inspected every year, and they give you basically a stamp saying you can have 2 people who aren't related living in the same house, or you can have, if you're grandfathered in, you can have 3 people. So within the city limits of Clemson, you can't you have to you can't rent to a bunch of people in one place. That's the problem. So most of mine are so instead of houses, like my house is in Clemson, we rent to faculty members, we rent to 1 or 2 people, but it's not necessarily trying to get as many people into one house. And so our multi-unit properties are the equivalent of that though. So we're the niche we have is like you have all these student rentals. The most expensive ones are the brand new luxury apartment complexes, and they might rent for like, let's see, right now $1,200 per bedroom, somewhere in there. Whereas our studios rent for 600 to $800 per bedroom. So we're like a more affordable option, but we still try to be close to campus on the bus line. So we're going for like the grad students. We're going for the people who don't want to live with a roommate, who don't want to pay the luxury stuff. They just want a nice, affordable place that's clean, that's on the bus line. So we're like kind of the no frills, convenient budget location where it is a contrast to all the other stuff that's more fancy and newer. We're not trying to be all that.
Totally, totally makes perfect sense. Awesome, Chad. Well, where to next? Where's your journey taking you next?
I'm like I mentioned with real estate, we're just slowly kind of evolving our portfolio. I'm investing with, have some partners here and there where I invest with somebody else's deal. But real estate is fun, but I really like teaching. I like coaching other people. Coach Carson's my platform. So I think I'm a professional student. Like I love learning. I've always been reading books, but as a student, it's the most joy I get is also seeing other people succeed from this. So yeah,
Mhm.
I wrote the books for Bigger Pockets. I really appreciate kind of Bigger Pockets helping me get started kind of with that platform. But then I do my own podcast and I teach other people. So I spend most of my time doing that, making podcasts and teaching. I feel like you have to have your foot in the reality of being a real estate investor as well. So like I take the laboratory of my own properties and experience, and then I bring the lessons, the good and the bad, the things I've screwed up, and then I try to bring that full circle and help people on their journey and learn and evolve, and kind of like my dad did, kind of like other mentors have done for me. I'm trying to do that for other people. So that's where my head is. I'm trying to do that as well as I can and teach as much as I can and just have a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. Well, that sounds great. Well, Chad, it's about that time to head into the final part of our show. Is there any other words of wisdom that you'd like to embark on our audience?
I mean, we've talked a lot of details. I love getting in the weeds, so thank you for asking all the financing stuff. But I would just say if you're in real estate already, or if you're just getting started in it, this is a great decision. I mean, this is a I can't think of any asset class other than real estate where it has so many benefits all at one time. And this is the regular person's path to making a lot of money. You can take earnings from your job. If you're a full time worker, you can save the money. You can put it in you plant the seed in a rental property, and then 10 years from now, that 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 bucks you put in there can grow into 500,000 or $1 million, and that's just amazing. Like, that's still, after 21 years, that still blows my mind that it's so accessible for people like us to get into real estate. So I guess it's one of the words of wisdom are just validate people's decision for doing this. It's not going to be easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but it's worth it. Like, this is an amazing vehicle to jump into.
Couldn't agree more, man. Couldn't agree more. All right, Chad, Rocky, you know what time it is?
I do.
It's time for the
Four.
final.
The final four.
All right, kick us off, Chad.
Yeah. Chad, what book are you currently reading?
The book I'm reading right now is next to my bed. It's called The Birth of Plenty, and it's called how the prosperity of the modern world was created. So that's a mouthful, but it's basically it's kind of an economic history of why do we have this society where we can buy real estate and you have private property and that you can build wealth and there's money available for you to do it. Like, we all kind of take that for granted, but it's not the norm. As I've traveled to other parts of the world, like, you kind of see there's different systems, different financing systems, and we're like fish swimming in the bowl of the American economy, and I think we take it for granted. At least I did. And so this book goes through a history of kind of how that all came to be, what some of the kind of core origins of private property rights were, in particularly in the Western world, in England, and with common law. So people might not be interested in this, but I find it really fascinating, and I'm really eating it up. It's a lot of fun.
That's really fascinating. That's cool. Yeah.
All right, Chad, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
My mentor early on, his name is Louis Stone, is that professor who was also my first private lender. He always had these little like acronyms and little folksy kind of wisdom. And he told me, Chad, if you want to succeed in business, here's what it was. Right after class one day when I was like bugging him and talking about real estate, he said, Chad, do you want to know how to become rich? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. I'm 22 years old. I have no money about it. Yeah, I want to become rich. He's like, here's what you got to do, Chad. First, you got to learn how to make $40,000 per year and live off $40,000 per year. Got it, Chad? I was like, yep, got it. He's like, next, what you got to do is you got to learn how to make $80,000 per year and still live off $40,000 per year. Got it, Chad? I'm like, yep, got it. Good. He's like, next, Chad, you got to learn how to make $120,000 per year and still live off $40,000 per year. Got it, Chad? I'm like, I got it, Louis. I'm good. He's like, Chad, if you can do that, you can't help but become rich, and it'll happen a lot faster than you think. That was the advice. It was about lifestyle creep. It's about the danger of letting your lifestyle kind of match your income. And that simple advice that was so good, and it helped me survive the Great Recession. If I had spent a bunch of money when I made money for the last 3 years, I would have probably crashed and burned during the Great Recession. I'm glad I didn't. But it also is the kind of the path to becoming wealthy too. So that's simple as that.
Absolutely. It's like millionaire next door type philosophy. Yeah.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Next question is, what is your why?
I'm really loving this idea of being a teacher. That's for me is like, it's full circle. Like, I have 2 kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. I played sports. I played football. I played basketball. I love playing pick. So like the idea of being a teacher and a coach is a big why for me. That you can help other people do some of the things you've done. You can help them reach their potential. So that's sort of my mind lately. One of my favorite examples is a guy named John Wooden, who was a Hall of Fame basketball coach at UCLA. And so I've got a little book next to my bed that I read a lot called Wooden, just like little 1-page chapters of just ideas for how sports is like a good analogy for life, and how you try to be your best, you try to coach other people, you try to be a leader, be an example. And so I think that's sort of resonating with me and the direction I'm going in my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love it.
Totally, man. All right, Chad. Question number 4. Do you think aliens really exist?
I do, but I think they're just like bacteria. I don't think they're actually like, these things these intelligent beings that are going to come fly in a space. It's probably just like some planet. There's this like slime on the planet, and that's an alien being. We're like, oh, It's pretty disappointing, but they're out there.
Yeah.
I'm a biology major, by the way, so I got that's what I
Yeah.
studied in college.
Yeah. I can totally tell. Yeah. Awesome, Chad. Well, where can people find out more about you? Tell us a little bit about the Coach Carson platform and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm if you listen to podcasts, I have a new podcast episode every Monday. So if you just search for Coach Carson on any podcast platform, I do a lot on YouTube as well. So if you just type in Coach Carson on YouTube, I would love to connect with you there. And then if you're on the internet, on the web, coachcarson.com is my home there. And I've got a free toolkit that I give out with a lot of these spreadsheets and kind of the creative stuff that I just talked about today. If you just want to get into that for free and kind of see what I'm all about, check me out at coachcarson.com.
Awesome. Chad, Coach Carson, Coach Chad Carson. It's all the alliterations. Thank you so much for coming on, man. We super appreciate you spending your time. And it's so great to just to kind of catch up, learn a little bit more about your origin, which I actually didn't really know that much about. So I'm glad we kind of dug in there, and super valuable that it still applies today. And it's what I love about you is like almost everything that you've done is repeatable, right? Like there is no swarm of good luck. There's no, I mean, I'm sure you've had it in some investments and stuff, but like nothing great that no one else can't replicate. So
thank you. It's been a lot of fun talking to you guys. And I hope if anybody listened to this, they take some ideas that they can apply, and let me know. I'd love to hear from you if you apply any of these ideas and found them helpful.
Awesome, Chad. Thanks so much, man. Make sure you go follow Coach Carson, and we'll talk soon, man.
Thank you.
See you, Chad. Good stuff.
And that was Coach Carson. Chad, what'd you think of Chad?
Chad's awesome. I just love, I was super into it because I just love like his wealth of knowledge, and the more experienced investors you can learn so much from. I love the question of like, what would you do different, or if you just start all over again? And his why too was amazing. It's all about giving back. Like he's a coach is what he loves to do, and just help other people get started. Like those people are awesome. It's just great.
Yeah, Chad's he's a really, really good, genuine dude. And a lot of people I think say that, and you can kind of tell they're blowing smoke about it. Like, oh, they just want to give back. Or, yeah, okay, buddy. Like, but with Chad, I actually legitimately do think he gets great fulfillment from that. And I know because Chad's given me tremendous advice. And again, I've known Chad for a while, and he's given me great advice in my beginning days. And I guess I need to stay in touch with him more clearly. Yeah. So so definitely guys go give Chad Carson a follow. Coach Carson. He's a really, really good dude. And one other thing that I love that he said is like you can tell that he doesn't have an ego with his properties. Like he doesn't care about the amounts he owns. He'd rather own more, free and clear, have the cash flow. And even for his investors, he wants to give benefit to their life. He's like, yeah, like I give some of my investors their grocery money. Like that's what they say. And like that makes me feel really good to like have the grocery money. And so I just think like everything he says and does just comes from a really genuine place. And yeah, love the dude. So
yeah, absolutely. I think we you and I talk about too is like that slow, steady, not the sexy, like arbitrage and short-term rentals. And he's proven again that it works. So the long-term rentals, you buy a property, one property a year, you're going to be very wealthy. You're going to set yourself up to have your kids wealthy. Nothing crazy strategies, just slow and steady.
Yep. Slow and steady wins a race, right? Like that tortoise in the hare.
Exactly.
All right, man. Chad, it was so good hanging out with you again this week, brother. If you guys would, y'all who are listening, please leave us a rating and review. Helps us get better guests, helps us get better in the SEO world, and helps us, gets us more listeners, which gets us more guests, which gets us more listeners, which gets us more reviews. And so, but it all starts, you guys are all the start of that funnel with those reviews. And so please do give us a follow on Instagram. I'm the Fi Guy. Chad is
Rocky the Realtor.
Rocky the Realtor. And we'll see you all next week.
That's it for this episode of Investify. We hope that these nuggets of real estate wisdom lead to more savvy financial planning and a clearer path towards financial freedom. For more content like this, subscribe to the show at investify.com. Don't forget to leave a rating and share it with your friends. Together, we can transform more real estate newbies into successful and clever investors. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next one.